It's 10/28/2024. Level Up College Football Podcast. Andy P and Big G in the building. Minus Sarah C today. Hey, all well wishes to you, Sarah. We're hoping you're getting better. For all of our listening audience and viewers, she's down for the count right now, but she's going to be okay. But Andy, you know how we get out on Fans First Sports Network, Level Up College Football Podcast. And listen, wherever you get your audio podcasts, Google, Apple, and or Spotify. You can always listen to us and watch us, but we appreciate it on the live show on YouTube. Andy, what's up with my co-host? What's crack-a-lacking? I see you decked out with all that black and gold over there. There's a reason going on for that, bro. What's happening with you?
Man, if you're listening to this, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any of those podcast places, it's Monday night. Steelers are playing the Giants here in New York, so that means I have to represent an enemy territory. Did it last Sunday night when we played the Jets. Was able to represent all Pittsburgh in New York. Now I have to do it again with the Giants, and looking forward to hopefully another big color rush game here. Those Giants do not look good. The Steelers look real good. And as always, got to give a plug here for Steel Curtain, my go-to Pittsburgh Steelers podcast network of choice. So, make sure you're listening to those guys to keep up on the Pittsburgh Steelers talk this season.
Man, absolutely, man. And Andy, I get out on the Steel Curtain Network. If you watch live or any YouTube show, check me out on Wednesdays on Pump Your Brakes podcast on Steel Curtain Network and on Fridays with the homies and homies overtime. But all the shows over on Steel Curtain Network is just off the hook. And any of you guys that like the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure you swing over there and subscribe. But that's not what we do on Mondays, bro. On Mondays, we talk specifically college football. Andy, we've been doing this about 2 years, man. And for the first time in like a 2-year period, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I don't know what the heck I'm talking about, because I have never seen college football shook up the way it's shook up right now. There's not a real number one team. There's a bunch of teams that can beat anybody on any given Saturday. Teams are losing that ain't supposed to be losing. Teams are winning and ain't supposed to be winning. Andy, what do you make of this chaos that's going on in college football, bro?
This is a natural consequence of a lot of things coming together. The first is, obviously, it's not a college football show if you don't talk about the transfer portal. We are just seeing so much talent. Like, let's take a look at Indiana, a team that's not on our rundown this week. They're a team that was the center of the college football universe this week, and it was because they are a roster primarily built out of transfers from James Madison. Now, previously, in other years, James Madison would be this dominating, undefeated, FCS team that we're all rooting for and that we're all interested in. We think that, can they get into a bowl game? Can they play a big-time team? Now, in the transfer portal era, that coach, Kirk Cignetti, takes everybody that he knows can play, takes them with him to Indiana, and it just raises the floor for a lot of these programs because you're able to get talented players from all around college football and bring them into your program. So again, there's a lot more parity here because of the transfer portal. The other part of this is college football realignment. We knew, you and I talked about this at the beginning of the year, that the SEC and Big Ten especially were going to see teams have much harder schedules, and this was going to result in teams taking losses when in previous seasons they probably would not have, because the schedule would have been more spaced out. But when you look at the Big Ten, the only undefeated teams are Oregon and Penn State, and I think that changes this week. We're looking at the SEC. The only undefeated team that we have over there is Texas A&M, and I don't know if that lasts this week. And when you then look at the Big 12, it's just as chaotic. And the ACC has one undefeated team that has done its best to not be undefeated this season.
Big facts.
And so, again, we're just looking at a situation where the conferences just added so many teams. We knew the schedules makers would try to make sure that there was always helmet versus helmet games. But that means that the best programs are going to take losses. You see it in the NFL all the time. Nobody runs the table. Patrick Mahomes has never had an undefeated regular season. It's just not built to happen in an elongated NFL season. In college football, it could happen because you would have unbalanced conferences. You would have shorter schedules, and that would allow for these undefeated seasons to happen routinely. I genuinely mean this. I don't think that they will do it, but if Oregon runs the table and has an undefeated season, wins their playoff games and wins the national title and is an undefeated champion at what? 17-0? Best football team ever. Best college team ever.
That's big facts. That's big facts. Hey, listen, I'm going to answer this question for Afton. Afton, how do I feel about Vandy not being ranked in the top 25? I understand that they got the 2 losses with close to Texas and with who else they lose to?
Missouri in overtime.
Missouri. Yeah, but they don't deserve to be ranked. If they would have beat Texas, yeah, put them there. But no, absolutely not. They don't deserve it. But Andy, so listen, I'm digging everything you said concerning why we have this jumble up or mesh or chaos that's going on in college football. And that leads me to this part of it. Man, we got doomsday scenarios going on everywhere in every conference. The Big 12, the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 10 all have doomsday scenarios that can either make it really good or make it really bad. And with only 5 weeks left in the season, I think it's fair to our viewers, everybody that rocks with us, for me and you to go through some of these doomsday scenarios, right? Because, we thought the expansion of the 12-team playoff was going to make it better. And in my mind, Andy, it's actually made it worse because it's going to be harder to try to figure out who deserves to be there and who don't deserve to be there, right? So I just want to start with one conference. Let's talk about the Big 10, right? We'll move to the SEC and other conferences, but I think the Big 10 has the most chaotic scenario that could ever occur because you have Indiana, who's an undefeated team, Oregon, who's an undefeated team, Penn State, who's an undefeated team, and Ohio State sitting with 1 loss, right? The way that the schedule falls and the way it's because they all don't play head-to-head, right? Oregon misses Penn State. Ohio State misses who? Oh, they don't miss none. Ohio State gets them all, right? And then Indiana doesn't play Oregon. So in a crazy world, all 4 of those teams could end up with 1 loss, and they could knock each other off head to head. So how would the Big 10 even come about picking the 2 teams to go to the conference championship? Because it's not like how it was before, was weighted on division and conferences. It doesn't work like that anymore. And if the head-to-head, you beat me and I beat you, does it come down to points? Or because, Andy, I'm telling you, I got a doomsday, and I just got that feeling it's going to happen in the Big 10. I just want to get your thoughts concerning the Big 10 conference, man, because I think it's in shambles, bro.
Yeah, I mean, the formula is really complicated. So in this scenario that we're talking about, which again, very likely here that we've got a bunch of 1-loss teams with losses against each other, head-to-head results, which is the first tiebreaker, obviously kind of eliminates that one. The second tiebreaker scenario is the record against all conference opponents. So you would need to look and see every single team that played all 4 of those teams and see how each one of those teams did in that pool, which again, that it's pretty complicated. But because there's 4 teams, it's probably a pretty small pool, chance that there's like some even records there. So then the third is you take the highest ranked mutual opponent, whether that is, and then whoever did the best against that team moves on. And then in some, this is where it gets kind of crazy here. Not saying that we're going to get this far, but I think it's really funny that they had to go this far. So let's just say, for example, all 4 of these teams have the best record against the same opponents. There's multiple teams all tied with the best result against the opponent who had the best record.
Facts.
Then it goes by best Big 10 winning percentage. So again, you're pretty much just taking the record. It's going to be about the same. I don't know how that's going to be different. There is then highest ranking by Sports Source Analytics would be the final tiebreaker.
Wow.
Highest ranking by Sports Source Analytics. And in case you're wondering what Sports Source Analytics are, they are a data platform that provides advanced stats to all of the college football playoff committee. They have deals with the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, the Pac-12, the Big 12, and the American. They are, I'm assuming that they have some internal records that they're referencing here, but I can't find anything immediately off the top of my head. Yeah. But again, I will say this, and to kind of alleviate some of these doomsday scenarios here that I think might drop off here. Penn State, this Ohio State game is going to be huge. We're going to preview this game. Yeah. And the rest of their schedule is fairly soft. So I do think that Penn State here is probably a lock because they're just going to have one or no losses unless they drop a surprising result here. Right. I think Ohio State, again, this Penn State game notwithstanding, they have Indiana and Michigan. Now, I think that Ohio State might be the best of these teams that we're talking about, but Ohio State definitely has the hardest route forward here. Correct. And then we look at Indiana, and out of these four teams, I think Indiana is the one that's going to have the hardest time, if only because their next stretches are they have to go to a Michigan State team that showed a lot of fight against Michigan. Then they have to play Michigan, have to go to Columbus, and then they finish up against Purdue in what should be an easy win, but is a rivalry game for Indiana. Correct. So again, I think Indiana has a clear path to 2 losses, maybe 3. But they are clearly the weakest of these 4 teams. But again, Big G, to your point, like that kind of wraps this whole thing together. If I look at SP Plus, my preferred metric, which is available on ESPN, all 4 of these teams are in the top 13 in the country when it comes to S&P. So when we're talking about the playoff, and we're talking about the 12 most deserving teams in the country, there is an argument to be made that all 4 of these teams should be in the playoff, whether or not they make it to the Big Ten Conference Championship game, which is Indiana's the surprise here. But we went into this season knowing Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State deserved to be in the playoff.
Yeah. And that's Andy, that's what I'm saying. Could you imagine? Ohio State beats Penn State. That's their only loss. Ohio State beats Indiana. That's their only loss. Oregon beat us. That's our loss. And then Oregon drops a game to Penn State or drops it to Michigan. Now, what are you going to do? And then this thing would be the killer part. You get everybody with 1 loss. They all make it to the conference championship game. The one team wins, and you're sitting with 1 team with 2 losses and 1 team with 1. And they're saying, wait a minute, this team that we beat is going to the playoff and we only lost that game. Come on, man. We beat everybody else. So I think the Big Ten has the hardest prelude. Now, this is the catch-22, Andy. And like I said, we would talk about the Big 12 and the ACC. I think the ACC's got a clear champion unless Pittsburgh does something bananas. The Big 12's in shambles as far as like who can win and what. And we'll get to that when we talk about Colorado. But the issue is the SEC. The 12-team playoff was expanded to make sure that teams like Alabama and Georgia and never miss the playoff ever again. Because I've been saying it and I'm going to keep on saying it. It's bias across the way concerning college football when it comes to the SEC. But Andy, we got a realistic scenario that Bama and Georgia can miss the SEC championship game. And not even be a question. Because you got teams like LSU, teams like Texas A&M, teams like Texas, teams like Tennessee that is either undefeated or 1 loss. So what does the SEC do?
Yeah, this is, again, the SEC this year, half of the teams in the conference are ranked. It is a 16-team conference. 8 of those teams are ranked, which is insane. There's, I think, a little bit less clarity in the SEC than there is in the ACC, if only because you've got this Texas A&M team that is undefeated and on top of the conference. They have a tough challenge this week in South Carolina, but they are favored. They then play New Mexico State, who's trash, and they play at Auburn, who's also trash, before they finish the year at home versus Texas. And I say that because if this game was at Austin, I would feel differently. But because it's in College Station, like tickets for this game I saw something on Instagram. CBS Sports is reporting tickets for this game are already get into the stadium starting at $750.
Yes.
It is going to be the must-watch game of rivalry weekend. And there's a good chance Texas here goes with has 2 losses in conference. Okay, cool. Texas A&M goes undefeated in the SEC. They're in the conference title game.
With a loss to Tim's team, the Irish. He said, "Go Irish, man."
Yes. Well, this is the thing. They're undefeated in the SEC, which is this is what we're talking about here. So yeah, Tim, you're right. Go Irish. I forgot about that one, but they'd be undefeated in conference.
Yes.
Georgia. So if Texas has 2 losses, you start looking at the 1-loss teams, which are Georgia, Tennessee, and LSU. Because Alabama again has 2 losses. So now Alabama's rooting for Georgia to drop a game, Tennessee to drop a game, LSU to drop a game in order for them to potentially get into the college football playoff. Tennessee and Georgia face each other, so one of these 2 teams is going away with a 2nd loss. Tennessee also plays at Vandy in the last game of the year. So Afton, I know you mentioned it, but like Vandy has a chance to, again, really mess with the SEC here in the last game of the season. Vandy also plays LSU, who also plays Alabama this week. Right. And so now, next week. Next week is the LSU-Alabama game. They're on a bye week this week. So again, one of LSU could have 2 losses. Alabama could have 3 losses. This is an elimination game for Bama. So we're just in this position where in the SEC, I think it's a little bit less clear only because you're talking about a pool of teams with 2 losses instead of 1 loss.
Facts.
But again, if Texas A&M runs the table like they're supposed to, Georgia runs the table like we expect them to, that's your title game right there. It just seems really hard. All these teams are so good. It feels like there's at least 1 more loss in there for everybody here.
Andy, so this is the doomsday I'm talking about with this, right? So now this is, you get 4 Big Ten teams, everybody with 1 loss.
Yep.
Okay, there's 4. All right. Notre Dame 1 loss, there's 5.
Mm-hmm.
Boise State's your group of 6, there's 6.
Mm-hmm.
ACC champion, there's 7.
Yep.
Big 12 champion, there's 8. Okay. Now you got other conferences where like a BYU or Iowa State might end up with 1 loss. You can end up with a Pittsburgh team that's got 1 loss and only lost in the championship game to Miami. Okay. So you got to get theirs 9. How do you justify putting in? Because you just ran down the litmus. Alabama's currently ranked 6 in the SEC. Ole Miss is currently ranked 8th in the SEC, who's got the plethora of teams in front of them. How do you justify a 2 or 3 loss SEC team being in the playoff when you got all these other teams that's got 0 losses or 1? So that's why I say, man, this thing is way more complicated than what people are actually looking at and viewing. And I don't see how the committee's going to justify it. There's no way you can justify the SEC gets more than 3 in based on the current records of the teams. Your thoughts, bro?
So this is where I'm going to push back on you a little bit because the NCAA, again, I would like to make this clear. This is not the NCAA. It's the College Football Committee, which is different from the NCAA. It's its own separate thing.
Facts.
But we know that the NCAA has a system in place to handle things like this for basketball, and it's called the Selection Committee, and it's where they are given specific data points, and they said you can only consider these data points in this conversation. What we don't know for the College Football Playoff Committee yet is which data points they're going to be told they can consider. So if we're talking about head-to-head results, if we're talking about conference results, if we're talking about traditional stats like overall defensive ranking, overall offensive ranking, I think it becomes a little bit cut and dry where the 12 playoff teams are going to be the top 12 of the AP poll. I think we've seen historically those things kind of line up. What we started to see in college basketball is that advanced metrics like KenPom are allowed into the selection committee. And now that college conferences have gotten so big, in order to differentiate, okay, how does this 4 or 5 loss team from the Big Ten stack up with a 1-loss team from the American Conference? Because in basketball, you have more games, so the data set's larger, and it makes for a better analytical environment. In football, we're still talking about 12 games. The data set hasn't changed, and I don't know, let me go. The reason I keep mentioning S&P Plus here is not only because do I like this metric, it's owned by ESPN, who is in bed with the playoff. So there is a non-zero chance that Football Power Index, SP Plus, these things that you and I talk about each week, they are part of what the selection committee is going to be allowed to use. And if that's the case, these metrics are the ones that start making arguments. Like, for example, in SP Plus, a 2-loss LSU is ranked higher than a 1-loss Clemson or a 1-loss Kansas State or 1-loss SMU. A 2-loss Alabama is the 5th ranked team in SP Plus, above an undefeated Penn State, above an undefeated Miami. Again, last year, we saw the committee say it matters about your losses, your overall losses, and then head-to-head games. Those are the things that we care about most.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the same thing they care about this year or not.
Oh, my goodness gracious, man. This thing is in shambles. And so, Andy, from now until the end of the season, we are going to be talking about chaos. And we haven't even got to the first selection show yet. That'll be after this week's Ohio State-Penn State game. So we'll start talking about seeding and selections after that. But, Andy, you know how we do. We got to pay some bills, pause for the cause. If you're watching us live on YouTube, just stick with us for a second. We got to get a word from our sponsors on the audio side of the platform. If you're listening to us wherever you get your audio podcast, Spotify, Apple, and or Google Podcasts, we'll be right back with the College Football Level Up podcast. Yo, we done paused for the cause. We back from the commercial. Thank you for rocking with us. Thank you for everybody rocking us with over in the live chat. We appreciate y'all watching our live show. Andy, we got a quick segue because we got some games we got to break down. But, man, we can't do a college football show without giving homage because both me and you destroyed this guy all preseason. So when we destroy, we got to get love and flowers. The Deion effect is real, bro. 6-2. Colorado Buffaloes, now ranked number 23 in the Associated Press poll, has a huge opportunity to get to a major bowl, not just a little bowl, a major bowl, and possibly could sneak into the college football playoff. I got to get your reaction to this unbelievable story of Deion Sanders taking a program that only won one game 2 seasons ago and now on the brink of becoming not a power, but relevant in college football, bro. Your reaction concerning the Buffaloes.
Yeah, I think that there's 2 interesting things about Colorado right now. The first is that they are taking advantage of a very down Big 12. We knew the Big 12 was going to be chaos, but Oklahoma State being one of the worst teams in the country, let alone the conference, definitely a surprise. Kansas State being incredibly inconsistent opened the door for them. Again, Kansas State is the highest ranked team in the Big 12 in SP Plus, and they're only 15th. And so this is where Colorado can sneak in here and say, we weren't a good team at the beginning of the season. I stand by that. That game against Nebraska was absolutely shameful in execution and in terms of just the way that Colorado handled itself in that environment. But we're going to talk about Oregon later, and I'm going to give Dan Lanning a lot of credit for adjusting aggressively after early season struggles. Have to give Deion that same level of trust. This is still a team that doesn't want to run the ball. This is still essentially a team running the air raid, but they have gotten significantly better at limiting the number of shots that they take downfield and mixing in intermediate passing games in order to prevent defenses from simply stacking the box with 5 guys and rushing Shador and forcing him out of the pocket. They've done a much better job in the quick passing game. Their offense is now ranked 35th in SP+. Their defense has risen from the hundreds into being in the 50s. That's not great, but it's certainly respectable. The only area that Colorado really shows weaknesses is in special teams. And Colorado has essentially eliminated that by being hyper aggressive in their decision making in fourth and go situations. And so I think that this is a team where we look at what Mike Elko is doing at Texas A&M, hitting the transfer portal and going after high-end players, but going after system guys. We look at what Kirk Cignetti is doing at Indiana, or what Fran Brown is doing at Syracuse, going after system guys in the transfer portal who are going to play a certain system and way of playing about it. Dion went into the transfer portal and just said, give me the best bodies. Yes. And in a year where there's a lot more parity and these games are a lot closer, we've seen time and time again, Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter are the two best players on the field, and they are now mature and they are now experienced enough at the Power 5 level to rise to that occasion and execute in those biggest moments. And I think that is something that we, especially myself, undersold about this program. But also, not for nothing, Travis Hunter only missing a half of college football instead of 4 or 5 games at this point. Huge difference when you have arguably the best overall football player in the game every snap.
Big facts, man. And listen, I would be remiss to not even say this. Shedeur Sanders is on pace to throw for 4,000 yards and 40-plus touchdowns. That is nothing to sneeze at. Currently, right now, he has about 2,600 yards passing, 21 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, right? The other night, he was 15 for 15. And when you start looking at the remainder of their schedule, Texas Tech, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Utah, at the beginning of the season, Andy, we said none of those games are winnable. Now you look at it, they can win them all. They can win them all, legitimately be 10-2, and playing in the Big 12 championship game. There's no way. I said at max 7 games, possibly 8, maybe, but there's no way. There's no way I could actually have said or predicted at the beginning of the season that this program would turn around what they turned around. And you hit all the metrics out of the park. But I'm going to tell you what I've seen from an eye test with Colorado over the last 3 games. Defensively, they have stepped up beyond any team in college football. Their defense has went from a lower echelon, bottom feeder defense to now they're not at the top, but they are definitely at the middle of the pack. Because what I'm seeing them is put astronomical pressure on the opposing team's quarterbacks. 2 games ago, they had 9 sacks. Last Saturday, they had 6.5 sacks. They are going after the opposing team's quarterback over and over and over again. And they're putting themselves in position to like, look, you're going to have to beat us in a straight-up race, Lamborghini on Lamborghini. And I don't think you can do it if we're putting your quarterback on the ground. So that's, to me, the biggest, because like you said, yes, Travis Hunter probably is the most electric college football player we've ever seen ever. But at the same time, and Shedeur Sanders is probably definitely, in my opinion, the number 1 overall quarterback and should get an invite to New York. But this team together has glued themselves. And you got to give respect to Prime, bro. Prime did it. So I'm going to ask you, Andy, before we segue to the games, how many does Colorado win this year, bro? How many do they get? Oh, you getting a big fine. You got the mute.
Dang it. This is what happens.
Go ahead.
Back-to-back weeks. I'm getting sloppy here. I'm getting too comfortable. We got to shake things up. So right now, SP Plus is giving Colorado about a 7% chance of making the playoff, which would essentially mean winning out for the rest of the year.
Facts.
That I feel is a little bit harsh, just because of, like you mentioned, Big G, their remaining schedule is definitely softer than when we were talking about them at the beginning of the year. And again, that is a credit to, that's not Colorado's fault. You play who's in front of you. And they've handled the top. And the only game that they've lost this year is the Kansas State game that was incredibly close. What I will say about Colorado is that this Texas Tech game, bit of a tricky game, if only because Texas Tech is willing to run with you. Utah won't be able to handle the firepower. Kansas makes too many mistakes on offense, and Oklahoma State is trash. Yeah. So this Texas Tech game, I think, is really going to be the one that dictates what Colorado can do. But again, because of that loss to Kansas State, BYU and Iowa State are still undefeated. And if they just run the table, if BYU and Iowa State run the table, that is your Big 12 championship game. And if Colorado is stuck with that one loss to Kansas State and Kansas State doesn't drop any games, that means that Kansas State would get into the title game over Colorado because they would have the tiebreaker scenario in that case. So again, we're looking at a scenario where it's really hard for me to imagine Colorado getting to the playoff, but I can see them winning out and getting to 10 games. I think 9 is playing it safe. But if you were going to ask me week after week, like who's the better team going into this game? Like they're better than Texas Tech. They're better than Kansas. They're better than Utah. They're better than Oklahoma State. They should win all 4 of these games. Yeah. It's just because of that loss to Kansas State, it's probably going to keep them out of the Big 12 title game without a lot of help from the rest of the Big 12.
Andy, I feel you, but I'm calling it, man. On other shows and other platforms, they like to call me this guy called G. Stradamus, man. It might be because there's some fixing going in and there might be shenanigans in the ranks, but the Colorado Buffaloes is playing in the Big 12 championship game. I'm calling it. I'm calling it right now. Something's going to happen and they're going to get there because it's going to sell. It's ESPN, man. It's Deion, Shedeur, Travis Hunter, Heisman Trophy finalists. The Big 12 has to be relevant. What more way could you do with this conference realignment by having the most electrifying team play on that platform? So I'm telling you right now, they're going to whoop Texas Tech. They're going to whoop Utah. They're going to whoop Oklahoma State, and they're going to whoop Kansas. And the Colorado Buffaloes, in my opinion, as long as there's not an injury to Shedeur Travis, will play in the Big 12 championship game. Tim said lies. He gave us. No, I did not give myself. That was actually given to me by other people. They said, man, you like Nostradamus, so we're going to call you the G. Stradamus. And then I made the sign. So yeah, that's where it all came from. And Tim Lyon, he's that heckling guy. So we appreciate you, Tim, and we laugh with you, man.
Before we move off Big G, you said at the beginning of the season, you said at the pregame show that if Colorado won double-digit games this year, Deion was going to go to Florida State. Facts. Now, I don't think either of us thought Florida State would be in a situation where they are out of bowl contention before Halloween, but that's what happened this past weekend. Yeah. And they look a mess. I've never seen, I was listening to a podcast. It probably took, the last time we've seen something like this is probably 2012 Auburn, where they went from defending champs, favorites to win the whole thing, and they look outmatched every week.
Facts.
Do you still think that if Colorado makes it to the Big 12 championship game, FSU is going to pony up the 40 or 50 million that it's going to take to buy out Norvell's contract, and then the other 20 million it's going to take to guarantee Deion makes a move?
Andy, you have to have splash in today's college football. You have to have a person that draws everybody to them. And I think that some of the fan base, as well as the alumni and the boosters, have gotten behind the idea that we can poach Deion. And listen, if he proved that he was able to do it at Colorado, who started with nothing? I mean, heck, look at their uniforms. Look at the improvement of the stadium. Look at all the stuff they got going on over there. Look at how much revenue they're making for Boulder, Colorado. Could you imagine what he can do at Florida State with that machine? When I'm telling you Florida State will be back within a matter of a year or two, they would be all the way back because he's going to circle the wagons of Florida. And all them guys is going to Miami and the Gators, UCF, you can forget it. They're all going to go to Tallahassee and play for Prime. So I can see it. Now, the other thing that I could think could happen is he might not be at Florida State, but he might go to Florida. And Florida's already got a quarterback and named DJ Lingway. So, and because that's all he needs. Because that's what his son is. His son is the guy who circles the wagons. So I can see him going to Florida or Florida State, realistically, because I think Florida's cooked the next 2 games. So now we got to have a talk about, we got to get rid of this guy. Let's bring in the hot name. So I think Prime either ends up in Gainesville or ends up in Tallahassee, Andy. That's just what I'm thinking, bro.
I am starting to come around to the Florida State idea just because I do not know how, if you're Mike Norvell, you sell this moving forward. Like, I don't know how you convince guys to come to via the transfer portal to come to Florida State. And I don't know how you're able to keep recruits that don't play right away, because if I'm a 5-star coming to Florida State, I'm starting because you guys were a 3-win program. Like, you're playing me right away. And Norvell does not have the bandwidth or the capacity to give these guys an opportunity to grow into roles right now. He needs to win double-digit games next year, or he's fired no matter what. So I just don't see a path forward here with we spent all offseason talking about how badly Florida State wants out of the ACC. There's just not a path here where they can make that justification out of the ACC without a Deion Sanders level of attention on the program week in and week out, because we've seen their argument before this year was that more people watch Florida State than any other program in the conference. And this season, with how bad Florida State's been, that has not been true.
Right? So there's no path. It's prime or bust. So whatever it takes, Andy, the bread is the bread. That's how they're going to get it done, bro. All right, so listen, we're going to switch it over. We're going to take another little quick commercial break, pause for the call, so that way we can talk all preview games after the commercial. If you're watching us live on YouTube, and we appreciate everybody rocking with us live, make sure you continue watching after we just take this little break. If you're listening to us wherever you get your audio podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, whatever platform you get on with, we'll be right back with the wrap-up of the Level Up College Football Podcast. Segue to the gateway. Back for Fans First Sports Network, Level Up College Football Podcast. Andy P and Big G in the building. Missing our call, Sarah C. Prayers for you, Sarah. We hope you're feeling better. You know that when you talk to us, and we just hope and pray that everything's going to be all right. And we thank everybody who threw up prayer hands in the live chat for her, because we appreciate it. Because it don't feel the same without Sarah being on the show. Absolutely. So, Andy, here goes our games, man. Preview of the week. We're going to start it off on where I think the chaos begins. Iowa State and Texas Tech. Iowa State is fugazi, bro. they fugazi. I'm telling you, they ain't for real, bro. They should have already lost twice. But Andy, I back up. I let you do what you do. They ranked 11th in the country. They 14.5 favorites. What you got to say, Andy?
I mean, look. It's not going to surprise anybody here that I'm going to say that the numbers don't like Iowa State, because the numbers don't like Iowa State. The eye test doesn't love Iowa State. They're 11 because they're undefeated and they're in one of the Power 3, Power 4 conferences here. This is an offense that is 48th in the country. That's the lowest of all of the conference contenders that we're talking about here by a wide margin. Their defense is good, but not great. It's 17th in the nation in SP+. That's good, but when you're talking about elite defense carrying a bad offense, you're going to need a lot more than that. And special teams, which is usually where these teams make their mark, Iowa State's just average. Like they're pretty much neutral when it comes to special teams. It's why when you look at what S&P Plus says about this upcoming week, they like Iowa State to win because Texas Tech is not a good team. They're a offensive heavy team, which means that, Iowa State, if they shut down the Texas Tech defense, then, they got nothing here. But if I'm a betting man, I would be taking Texas Tech here because I do not think that it's going to be 14.5. But I do think that, unfortunately, for everybody, for the Colorados here, I don't know if Iowa State is bad enough on offense to have a bad defense like Texas Tech stop them. Like, this is just going to be another week where we, at least in my opinion, we're going to watch this game and so, like, really? Big, that's the best team in the Big 12 right now? Really?
Yeah. Hey, Andy, listen. So I watched that dang on UCF Iowa State game. I saw it from the third quarter on. I didn't miss no downs. I was flipping back and forth with the clicker, right? And Iowa State should have lost. If the UCF, the guy doesn't cross the end zone and throws the ball down at the 1 yard line, that's the game, right? And then the whole thing that went on at the end with the guy not scoring and they get a reasonable pass interference, phantom call at the end. Listen, there was some calls made from the Big 12 office over there to Ames, Iowa, trying to preserve the fact that Iowa State was going to win. But then I messed around and watched them play again. Andy, all they got is that quarterback. And he's got some McCord in him. Let's just leave it at that. He's got some McCord in him. He will throw it away. He will throw it away, and he will throw pick sixes like there ain't no tomorrow. So I'm telling you, this is one of them games where a shootout can go down. And the one thing I know is Texas Tech can score a whole lot of points. Texas Tech can get 50 on you quick because they have that. It's not the air raid offense anymore. But what I'm telling you, they play 4 wide, both wide receivers outside of the hash, and they throw the ball all over the yard. That's how they play football. So that's just my preference, Andy. But you know how we do on the games. I got to get your score, your prediction, and who's going to win.
I mean, I don't disagree with you, Big G. Like, Texas Tech's offense is a top 40 unit in the country, according to SP Plus. I think that Texas Tech is going to put up some points here. I just don't think their defense is atrocious. I just don't think that they can really do a whole lot. Give me Iowa State 34, Texas Tech 31.
Ooh.
Another game where Iowa State pulls it out, but we don't love it. Again, this is less to do with how good I think Iowa State is, and more just, man, this is some mid in the Big 12 here.
He said straight mid. That's what I'm talking about. Hey, but listen, I'm telling you. You know what? We're still in October. It's still F around and find out season. Give me Texas Tech with the victory. 35-28. Texas Tech whoops Iowa State. Get Iowa State up out of here, and let's move on to the next team in the Big 12. And that's my chest. I'm staying on my chest, and I'm sticking it to it. All right, next game, Andy. And this is a team that's been effing around and finding out the whole dang on season. I swear to God that they got shamrocks in their shoes, in their sleeves, on the plane rides to wherever they go. They should have been lost by now. But you got the number 5 ranked Miami Hurricanes, who, in my opinion, might have the Heisman frontrunner, Cam Ward. 20-point favorite against the Duke Blue Devils, who just gave a game away against SMU in overtime by going for 2. Andy, the preview of the Miami Hurricanes and the Duke Blue Devils.
Man, it's the Manny Diaz Bowl, man. It's the Manny Diaz Bowl here. Manny Diaz, former head coach of Miami, who was unceremoniously fired in order to get Mario Cristobal in the door after a little jaunt in the Big Ten as Penn State's defensive coordinator, is now the head coach at Duke, which I do think is a good fit. I think that what Manny Diaz will work really well at Duke. It worked well at Temple. And I think there's a lot more similarities between Temple and Duke than there are Duke and Miami. That is some ACC bias and commentary right there. But look, Duke doesn't want to spend on its football team. Wants to spend on its basketball team. And Malik Murphy at quarterback at Duke, great addition in the portal.
Facts.
I'm just going to say, though, you cannot commit 6 turnovers in a game. Like that is, you cannot get 6 turnovers and not win the game. Like, there is that game against SMU was proof to me that, one, SMU is not for real. They play Pitt this week. I think Pitt has a good chance to knock off SMU and move forward here. But we're playing a Miami team here who is just as likely to make turnovers and just as likely to make mistakes. The problem that I have with this Duke team is that I just don't think that they're very good right now. I think that the Duke football program is fine, but only on one side of the ball. Their defense really solid. A lot of that's some carryover from the Mike Elko days, but that offense, SP Plus has it as the 81st ranked offense in the country. You start looking at some of the other advanced metrics, and it's just a situation where this is a game where we're going to have a not very good offense go up against Miami's defense, which isn't great, but it's still very good, and a very good offense, maybe the best offense in the country in Miami, go up against a pretty good defense. I just don't like this matchup for Duke at all, because they have just shown an inability to win games that have been handed to them. Cough, cough last week.
Facts. That's big facts. So, Andy, listen, I'm going to take the Florida State Miami game off the schedule. We know what happened in that game. I'm going to read you off 3 games in a row. Vatech, 38-34, Miami. Cal, 39-38, Miami. Louisville, 52-45, Miami. You know what all 3 of those games had in common outside of the Miami Hurricanes winning? They struggle with running quarterbacks. They struggle with dual threat quarterbacks. Guess what Duke has? The best dual threat quarterback in all of the ACC outside of Cam Ward. He's the number 1 dual threat quarterback there. Malik Murphy is a beast. Second thing, you know what else I know? Duke's defense is better than the last 3 teams I just named. Duke has a better defense than Vatech. Duke has a better defense than Cal. Duke has a better defense than Louisville. What does Miami struggle with? Their inability to put drives together consistently and score, except for when it's really tight in crunch time. Cam Ward will hit you with an explosive play, but Cam, can you put together 10 plays, 75 yards, and score without making a mistake? And, oh, by the way, the ACC officiating has bailed him out multiple games this year. So, Andy, I'm going to get your score and your prediction, but remember, we're in effing around and finding out October. So what's your score and prediction between Duke and Miami?
I love the argument that you made here, Big G. That's really compelling, and I don't disagree that this Miami team is flawed. I just really don't think this Duke team has it in terms of the ability to compete with Miami. I think this Duke team is a little bit overinflated in the way that we're looking at them. I think that offensive line is about to get incredibly outmatched here. I think Miami is going to, and again, this is not their fault. This is the way the schedule breaks out. I think Miami's entering the stretch of their schedule where they're playing some real sorry teams, and they're going to do what good teams do against sorry teams, and they're going to take care of business. Give me the Miami Hurricanes 38-10 over the Duke Blue Devils here.
You said a blowout, Andy?
I'm saying a blowout.
Listen, I'm going to hit you with the G Stradamus one more time. Down goes the Hurricanes. Duke wins 31-28 and get Miami up out of here as far as trying to get into that college football playoff outside of playing in the ACC championship game. Malik Murphy will play the game of his life against the Miami Hurricanes, and the Duke Blue Devils win and break the streak and puts Miami's opportunity to play in the college football playoff in jeopardy. We're going to game 3, Andy, and I think this might be the second best game on the schedule. Texas A&M versus South Carolina. Listen, I watched that Texas A&M LSU game. That backup quarterback for A&M is a problem.
Yeah.
That dual threat stuff he got going on, but South Carolina could easily be undefeated right now. They gave 2 games away. They gave the LSU game away, and they gave the Alabama game away. South Carolina could be undefeated right now. So, Andy, this is a big game for the Aggies at A&M, and they just came off the big win. Now they got to go over there to South Carolina. What you got this week in the preview, bro?
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking at Texas A&M fans here. Mea culpa, my bad. At the beginning of the season, everybody here saying, "Oh, this team's going to be a sneaky contender for the SEC. Oh, this team is better than the Notre Dame game, first game under a new coach." I wrote them off very aggressively, and that was the wrong thing to do. Mike Elko, hell of a football coach, and has Texas A&M in a position where they are not defensive led, they are not offensive led, they are a very balanced team, and I think they just made an upgrade at quarterback. Like, I am a full believer that, up until this season, Texas A&M, number 17 in the country in offense on SP+, 13 on defense, 15th on special teams. I think that offensive number is only going to get better, and having more snaps off the field is only going to help that defense. Nick Surtan, that defensive end who we all talked about at the beginning of the year and then forgot and then just kind of let go quiet. He played angry against LSU and was living in that backfield. Had some tackles that could have been crimes if committed in other states outside of a football field. I just think that this is a team, like you go through these runs of the college football season where you look at the stats and the stats say they're really good. And then you watch them play and you realize that they're just clicking cylinders. Saying right now, I wouldn't pick against them playing anybody in the country right now. I think that this is the best version of them. The question becomes, how long can you sustain this? Is this just like a 4 or 5 game stretch where you are playing great, or is this who you really are? We don't know that, but right now, I feel like Texas A&M is one of the best teams in the country.
Man, Andy, I'm telling you, Texas A&M looks dangerous. To me, they've proven that they maybe look like a top 10 legitimate team in the country, but then here comes this team with South Carolina that's got Lenora Sellis, that's got Rocket Sanders at running back, and it's got those 2 defensive ends, Stewart and the freshman number 6, that just cause all kind of hell. And I'm like, listen, man, South Carolina's got, I promise you this, South Carolina is the best 3-loss team in the country. I would take them against any other 3-loss team in the entire country, and they would beat the brake shoes off of them because of how much talent they have. And I think South Carolina is a year away. So next year they're going to challenge because everybody's back, right? And so I'm like, man, is this the game where they pull the upset? So, Andy, I just don't know. And even more so, who's playing quarterback for A&M? Who's playing quarterback? So if it's the backup, yeah. But if it's the starter, I don't know. Right? So, Andy, you know how we do. What's your score and what's your prediction, bro?
Again, I think that this is a situation where the benching, again, I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen Mike Elko's press conference today. It seemed like the benching was performance related. And so that would lead me to believe that Connor Wegman is not going to return and Marcel Reed is going to stay at quarterback.
Woo.
So give me Texas A&M to win this game because, again, I think Marcel Reed is the best quarterback on that Texas A&M roster. And I like Texas A&M to win this one, not in a blowout because South Carolina, good team for the reasons that you mentioned, but I think they win this one by a tutty. Give me Texas A&M 28, South Carolina 21.
Andy, this is one of the hardest games I've had to pick all season. I'm just going to be totally honest with you because I know how explosive Lenora Sellis is. I know how explosive South Carolina's defense is. So, but my gut tells me if the backup quarterback starts for A&M, they're going to win.
Yeah.
So I got it. Man, listen, 27-24. A&M wins late. But, man, when I'm telling you it's going to be a street fight, it's a street fight. And we might not know who wins the game until whoever's got the ball on the last possession. All right, we got 2 to go, Andy. This game is going to be closer. Listen, I'm telling you the G Stradamus again. This game is going to be closer than what everybody's saying. We got the Oregon Quackers and the Ducks 14.5 favorites. Invading Ann Arbor, Michigan to take on the Wolverines. Andy, talk to me, man. Listen, did you see that? Hey, man, everybody in college football needs to sue Oregon because they taking all the bread and using it on the uniforms and getting the kids to come out there to play. The uniforms this week is sick. That metallic gray is sick, man. So, Andy, they go to Michigan wearing metallic gray. What you saying this week for Oregon and Michigan, bro?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Oregon is just they're like, this is what I mean about Oregon. I'm about to you know what I said about Texas A&M? Oregon is the other team right now that I just cannot bet against. They are firing on all cylinders since that Ohio State win. Bill Connolly's SP Plus win expectancy essentially says if you play this game 100 times, who's winning this game 100 times? I think it's really like 1,000 times. But there's only been one game this season where Oregon's post-game win expectancy hasn't been 95%. And that was the Ohio State game where it was 54%. Again, that was the toughest game they played all year. It was a coin flip game. We knew it was going to be like that. But they obliterated Oregon State. They obliterated Boise State statistically, even though that game was close only because of Ashton Genty. They obliterated Purdue. That Illinois game, 38-9, did not do it justice, obliterated them. I am at the point where Michigan is going to want to play one certain way, and we know what that way is. And credit to them, Sharon Moore and the coaching staff have done a nice job of figuring out how to commit to Alex Orji at quarterback and building a quarterback system and offense that's a little bit more option-based than it is traditional quarterback drop-back passing-based, and that is allowing Michigan to play better and win more games. I'm here for it. However, Michigan wants to line up and punch you in the mouth. Dan Lanning wants nothing more than a game like this because he can all week in practice. He is pushing that Oregon team physically. He's pushing them mentally. This is the kind of game that Dan Lanning. To me, this is Oregon's Colorado game from last year. This is the game where Oregon knows everybody is saying, oh, you're not physical enough. Oh, you're not tough enough. Oh, you're going into the big house and Michigan's going to give you hell. You might win, but you're going to come out the other side worse for it. I think that this is the game when Oregon flexes their muscles and shows that they're the best team in the country this year. And I am waiting for those first few plays when Oregon just stacks 9 guys in the box and pins all those metallic wings back and just rushes into the backfield and starts causing hell in Michigan.
Yeah. I mean, without a doubt, this is the week for respect for Oregon. Oregon got mad respect, but you beat Ohio State at your crib with the piped-in noise and all the other stuff that was going on
1 point.
And it's a 1-point win. So this is the week that you go on the road against a big boy in the Big Ten. And you like, look, we're going to show you who's the daddy of the Big Ten. Now, that plays into Michigan's hands because Michigan wants a game in a phone booth. Michigan doesn't want no high-flying 38 points. No, heck no. Michigan wants this game to be 21-17, 24-20. That's what they're playing for. And they want to get physical. Matter of fact, I'm going to say it. They want to get sexual with Oregon. They want to get straight up sexual with them and get as close as they possibly can. So, Andy, I'm just saying, but give me your score concerning the Oregon-Michigan game this week, bro.
I am looking at this game, waiting for Dan Lanning and the team to just absolutely open up a phone booth of hell against Michigan here. Give me the Ducks 37-3 over the Michigan Wolverines. Ooh. I think this is going to be a bad time for the Wolverines.
Andy, that's saying a lot because Texas did. I was at the game. Texas didn't beat Michigan that bad. They didn't go in there and just stomp a mud hole on them. At their crib, Now, I'm not saying Michigan, because Michigan, listen, the deal with Michigan, if they had a serviceable quarterback, matter of fact, I'm going to be honest. If they started Jaden Davis this game, the freshman quarterback, I'd pick Michigan. I swear I would, because he opens up the game. But they don't have a guy that can throw a forward pass to win them the game. So I think the game stays close through 3 quarters, but I think come 4th quarter, man, Oregon is just too much. So give me Oregon to win 31-17. They're going to show that they're the number 1 team in the Big Ten. But Oregon, you better hope you don't come out of Ann Arbor with no injuries. You better hope, because I'm telling you, that's the way Michigan wants to play. They want to get physical with you. So we're going to find out if they really the real truth. All right, Andy, we come to the game that everybody knows that we came to talk about this week. The 3rd top 5 matchup of this season. Matter of fact, no, the 4th. Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon. Hey, Penn State University in Happy Valley versus the number 4 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes, who's 2.5-point favorites. Andy, Penn State got quarterback problems. Drew Alt might be out. His knee is jacked up. Ohio State's got left tackle problems. So we don't know what's going on over there because Nebraska abused their left tackle. Ohio State has shown that they got holes. Penn State has shown they got holes. What you talking about, Andy? Ohio State. And by the way, College Game Day and Big Noon Fox will both be there. So you know this is a huge game this week. So what you got, man? The Nittany Lions versus the Bucks.
I am having a hard time on this game because of the Drew Aller quarterback situation, but also not. So I just to kind of give you some insight, I switched jobs. I no longer work for FanDuel, which means I'm allowed to legally sports bet again. And I had myself a nice parlay going that could have paid out. I think it was like plus 1,000 odds. Yeah. And the last leg of that parlay was Penn State to win by 6.5 over Wisconsin. And when Drew Aller got hurt, I cashed out the parlay for 20 some bucks, and it still made me a nice little profit. But I was like, you know what? This offense is not good enough to score enough to win by a touchdown against Wisconsin. And Penn State showed a formula that they haven't shown in years past, which was we have an offensive system that isn't reliant on one player. This system can work even with the backup in, and our defense is stepping up and making big plays. And that's what they did. If I would have left it in, I would have been a lot richer today than I was on Sunday or on Saturday night. But this is I say all this to say that in any other season, I'd be taking Ohio State running away. Doesn't matter that they've got offensive line issues. Doesn't matter that Penn State's defense is primed to take advantage of those offensive line issues. Penn State folds in the weakest moments, especially when it is not a night game at Happy Valley. And this game is at noon, which takes away Penn State's biggest advantage, which is the whiteout at night in the biggest moments. So I look at this game and I say, I think Penn State is better equipped to handle a grinded out rock fight game, which I think Ohio State is willing to play. The problem that I have is that every way you slice this, Ohio State is just the better team. They are the number 2 team in SP plus, above Oregon, above Alabama, above Georgia, only behind Texas. Penn State is 8th. And it's because Penn State's special teams are below average and Penn State's offense is good, not great. And Ohio State's offense is borderline great. The defense is the best in the country, and their special teams are above average. So you're in this position where I'm just like looking at it, I'm like, the only way Penn State wins this game, and this is where I'm curious, Big G, on your side of the ball, what your analysis here is that Penn State needs to win this game by living in the backfield. But that's why Ohio State went out and got Will Howard. They've got a quarterback where they can shift and move the pocket, where they can do this type of bootleg offense that they couldn't run last year with Kyle McCord in a game like this. They have the ability now to shift the pocket and evade Penn State's pressure before the snap. And I think that, to me, this game comes down to Will Howard. And he had his mess up against Oregon. he's been statistically an above average quarterback this season. I don't think that he's an elite quarterback. I don't think he's one of the first 5 names called in the draft come next spring. I do think he's a good enough college quarterback to win you big games. And this is going to be a game where Ohio State lives or dies by Will Howard.
Andy, listen, I don't disagree with you, but I got some preference, man, into this. So I've seen the all 22 film from the Ohio State game. I actually watched it today, right? People were talking about Will Howard's matrix and he only missed X amount of passes, but I watched the game. Will Howard could have easily threw 2 other picks, right? And the pick that he threw was absurd. Like, I knew what to do. When a defense is sitting in cover 3, that means that your seam receiver, that corner that's on him is going to drop right in the middle. And how Will Howard didn't see that pass, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I'm sitting there like, no, even at the pre-snap read, because I'm behind him looking at the game. And I'm like, you don't throw it in the seam right there. It's either the late crosser or it's the straight bomb up the sideline. You don't throw that pass. And he threw it anyway. So that had a concern. There was another throw he made. It was on an out pattern. It was late once again. And I'm like, man. Now, could some of that contribute to the fact of the issues that you have at offensive line? Because Jonathan Simmons is out. Josh Simmons is gone, right? The guy that they had 65 in there, he was big trash. Nebraska was killing that boy. And I've never called a Buckeye offensive lineman trash, but I'm calling it on the show today. That was garbage. So is the solution they move Donovan Jackson to left tackle, who's the All-American left guard, and then they put Montgomery or they put Heisman in at guard to solidify the offensive line? But then my concerns are too, is Tegra doing what he needs to do at the right guard? Because I saw in a few plays, Nebraska beat him with base defense. And one thing Penn State's got is defense. Penn State's front 7 is not to be played with, right? So that's a concern of mine. Now, the solution is Ohio State's got to run the ball straight out. They got to get in a phone booth and stop being cute. But then this comes back to what you was asking me about. The play calling out of Chip Kelly was straight up trash. I have never seen a vanilla play calling in a game. Did you think you just didn't want to show anything against Penn State? Because against Nebraska, you can hold everything for Penn State? Is that the case? Did you go just base vanilla? So I got concerns offensively. What I don't have concerns with is defensively, because Nebraska got 17 points, but half of those points that they got was because David Espinosa wouldn't stop holding the Nebraska wide receivers. That boy had more penalties than you could shake a stick at. And oh, by the way, number 20, Arvell Reese, that they threw out of the game for targeting, has been reinstated by the NCAA as breaking news right before we came on the air. He's not going to have to sit out no plays because that was a bourgeois bogus call against the Buckeyes this week. So this is the deal, Andy. Ryan Day's 2-7 against top 5 teams, dog. And listen, it's the last Saturday. Well, it's the first Saturday in November. We're just going to be crossing over the threshold on effing around and finding out. And are we going to find out? Because I'll promise you this much. Day drops this game, they're going to be calling for his job.
Yeah.
There's already whispers, but it's full out megaphone call for the job this week. So, Andy, I'm going to let you do what you do. Tell me the score and tell me what the game's going to look like for the Buckeyes, bro.
I know my dad sometimes watches this show. He's a big Penn State guy. I don't want to do it. There's just, I'm a logical guy. The last time I went against my head, I picked Syracuse to beat Pitt, and we saw how that
Molly-whopping.
I just I can't get to a point where this works in Penn State's favor unless they do something they've never done before. And you know what? Like, if they do that, great. James Franklin, you've given me 10 bites of this apple and you've yet to get through. I think Ohio State's the better team. I think Ohio State has the better every side of the ball, but it's going to be a really close game. I'm going to follow SP Plus's lead here. Give me Ohio State 26-25, one-score game again. It's going to be heart pounding, what cardiac Buckeyes, but I do think that Ohio State wins this one and sets them up nicely for a Big Ten championship game berth.
Andy, if Drew Aller was starting quarterback for Penn State, I would pick the Buckeyes by 2 touchdowns. But he's probably not going to play. And that's what my concern is. Bo Prabila, the backup quarterback, I swear to God, it was Trace McSorley. I swear it was McSorley. I saw that number 9 out on the field, and I saw what he was doing. I was like, uh-oh. And the one thing that Ohio State struggles with is mobile quarterbacks. So listen, man, the game's going to be close. It's one score. My gut is telling me that Ryan Day knows his job's on the line. And my gut is telling me that there's going to be a state of urgency out of Columbus, Ohio, with them boarding the bus to go over to College Station. But I think it's going to be close. Give me the Buckeyes to win 28-24 with a late touchdown by no other than Jeremiah Smith to bail him out because he owes, based on what happened out there in Eugene with the offensive pass interference. So, and I just don't think that Penn State has the DBs to run with those electric 3 and 4 Ohio State wide receivers. So give me Ohio State 28-24. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of the show. We thank everybody for rocking with us in the live chat. Andy, you got any final thoughts and comments before we get up out of here, bro?
The only other game that we didn't get to that I think everyone's going to have their eye on, Pitt SMU. It's the late 8 p.m. ACC game. Look, if you want to get back into the ACC title game, man, you got to win this game. I think that they're better than SMU. I don't know if Pitt's good, but they're better than SMU. Take care of business on the road, guys.
Andy, I promise you that was the game I was going to pick as my respect game of the week. I think that Pitt, man, is for real. And I listen. If Miami don't go down this week against Duke, Pitt is waiting and laying for them because they're ready to beat the brake shoes off of them boys. So I like that game, and I think Pitt is going to handle their business against SMU. All right, man. Andy, tell them folks where they can find you, and then we're going to get up out of here.
Yeah, as always, make sure that you follow Disloyal Idiots. It's the Syracuse podcast on Fans First Sports Network. We record on Sunday nights, and we'll be doing that all football season. You can always follow me on Substack at AC Pregler over there. I'm writing my intermittently writing about college football, writing about Syracuse. But those are the 2 places where you can find me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Make sure you rock with me on all the Steel Curtain Network, all the Fans First Sports Network shows. The list is long. But the last thing that I want to talk to you guys about is making sure that you rock and subscribe to the Know-It-Alls podcast that we have on Sundays. The Know-It-All podcast is the base for every podcast network and every podcast channel because we're all part of one big podcast network, but really it all starts and ends with the Know-It-Alls podcast. I've put the name of the show in the chat for the exact name that you need to look up on YouTube. Capital N-O, capital I-T-A-L-L-Z podcast. Make sure you go over there and subscribe. We are working diligently to get to 1K subs by December 31st, and every subscription helps and helps us get to what we're trying to get as the goal of 1K for December 31st. So thank you again for rocking with every platform that I rock with and Andy rocks with. But make sure you subscribe over to the Know-It-Alls podcast. Andy, as for me and you, we're going to get out of here, but we're going to do it a little bit different. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. Here we go,